Good morning, America. This is Sam West broadcasting from Jenkins News Network. Today we will be doing a recap of the major events of the years 1856 to 1857. In these 2 years, many major events happened, including Bleeding Kansas, the presidential election, and the Dred Scott case. Before we get to this, we have a word of a civil dispute in Congress, and we're going live to Sam Desai at the scene.
Thank you, Sam. Here we are in the Senate, where there seems to be a disagreement between Preston Brooks and Charles Sumner. As you can see, they're currently occupied, but we're currently chill. Preston, a word, Preston, please.
Yes.
So, what seems to be the situation here?
Well, during Brooks' speech of the crime against Kansas, he disrespected me and my dear nephew, Andrew Butler. He is not here to defend himself, so I had to stand up for him and take matters into my own hands. I would challenge Brooks to a duel, but he is not a gentleman, so I must not be able to do that. This is for my nephew. This is for the South. And we must stay together, because the South is being disrespected by the North, and we have to fight for our rights.
What do you mean by being disrespected?
Well, Senator Charles Sumner was a vocal anti-slavery, and his blistering speeches condemned all slavery supporters like me. But excuse me, he's trying to get away.
Wow, what a turn of events. The first part of our scheduled broadcasting is the Bleeding Kansas incident, which occurred in May of 1856. The town of Lawrence, Kansas was in a heated debate on the topic of slavery and whether it was allowed or not in the new state. People against and for slavery moved to the new state in order to vote, even though voting was only supposed to be for citizens of the state. Tension and hatred grew between the two groups, and some people, such as John Brown, used this to show their disapproval of how things were being run. We have a video from when this event first aired, and we will show that to you now. This video showed how John Brown murdered his victims by dragging them out of their beds at night and hacking them to death. Also, people burned down public buildings and houses, adding to the violence in the area. All in all, these events totaled up to 200 deaths from both sides of the issue. Next in our programming is the presidential election between James Buchanan, John Fremont, and Millard Fillmore. Now we will show interviews of James Buchanan and John Fremont, two of the candidates this year, to discuss the election after the fact to see what went right or wrong.
I'm here with James Buchanan, who has just won the election of 1856. So how did you succeed?
Well, I am known to have great political experience, but throughout the campaign, there were doubts of Fremont's honesty, capacity, and sound judgment, which led me to my victory.
Now to Fremont, the runner-up. What happened to your campaign?
I had a very strong start in the election as I was a good fighter in the Mexican-American War. Then people started doubting me because of propaganda, which was completely false.
As for the statistics of the election, it was close between Buchanan and Fremont. On the map behind me, you can see Buchanan, in red, had heavy majority in the South, while Fremont had majority in the North. Millard Fillmore, as a third-party candidate, only managed to gain a majority in Maryland, shown in the light blue. Last but not least, we have a recap of the Dred Scott case, and we will show the actual proceedings because it sums up the court case quite well.
I used to be a slave in the South, but I was brought to the North and lived there for many years. Then my master died, so since there isn't slavery in the North, I should be free. I took it to the Missouri Supreme Court, who ruled that I was free. My new master appealed it to the Supreme Court.
The verdict is that Dred Scott is guilty, as no slave can be a U.S. citizen in my judgment of law.
After this, we had an interview with Justice Roger Taney to get a further explanation on the verdict.
Why did you determine that Dred Scott is guilty?
Well, legislator cannot outlaw slavery because of the Fifth Amendment. This amendment states a person's property cannot be taken without due process of law, as slaves are property. Also, the Missouri Compromise is unconstitutional as it tries to ban slavery. I do not believe that the government has the authority to outlaw slavery, so I have chosen to disregard the Missouri Compromise as well. Therefore, Dred Scott is not free and will never be free.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Before we end the broadcast, we have Sam Desai in the field with Charles Sumner, and we are hoping to put the events that were unfolding live earlier into perspective.
Here I am to see Charles Sumner in the hospital to ask a couple of questions. What do you think about the events that transpired earlier? That's well said. Do you stand by what you said earlier that ignited your beating? Alright, that makes sense. Any final words?
Andrew Butler's booty cheeks.
All right, thank you for your time.
Well, that about wraps up our scheduled programming and the major events for the last 2 years. I hope you all found this special recap informative. Stay tuned tomorrow for news reported daily. I'm your host, Sam West. Have a good rest of your day.
Okay, I started.
God, I can't fucking. What are you doing?
Why did you determine that Dred Scott is guilty?
Well, legislature cannot.
Here I am to see Charles Sumner in the hospital to ask a couple of questions. What do you think about the events that transpired earlier? It's well said. Do you still stand by what you said earlier, igniting your beating?
I messed it up.
I messed it up too.
Yeah, you go.
I'll try to mumble like an old man.
Here I am to see.
Why are you starting? I can't mumble like an old man.